Enhancement Fund, deposit this as a prepayment under Unit 0427. Same as last time. Don't file with the state.
That's what the HOA president wrote in a note to her treasurer in June of last year. I know because the treasurer eventually handed it to me, shaking, while his wife waited in the car. I never planned on fighting anyone when I moved home. My wife had been dead 3 years. My mother was turning 78. I came back to the Florida Panhandle to paint a cottage, fix a roof, and sit on a porch at night. Then Darlene Voss destroyed 3 palm trees my grandmother had planted in 1978, and something inside me turned from grief into clarity. I didn't know, that first week, that my grandfather's deed was still sitting in a Winchester safe upstairs in my mother's attic. I didn't know the pool Darlene was renting out for cash belonged to my family. But by the 4th of July, every person in Ashford Bluff was going to know. Tell me below, would you have forgiven or kept going? Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Caleb Whitaker. I'm 52 years old, and for 28 years I served in the United States Coast Guard, retiring as a chief warrant officer out of Mobile Station. After I retired, I built a small company called Whitaker Systems. It installs access control and security networks across the Florida Panhandle. I mention the company because it ends up mattering a lot. But none of that is why I came home. I came home because my wife Hannah died 3 years ago. Breast cancer. She was 47. After she was gone, my kids went off to school, and the Virginia house we had built together felt too quiet to keep breathing in. My mother Ruth was turning 78 in Walton County. My grandfather's beach cottage on Magnolia Lane needed a roof, a paint job, and a man to sit on the porch at night. So in March of this year, I loaded up my truck and drove south along the Gulf until the air smelled like salt and pine sap again. Ashford Bluff sits just inland from Seagrove Beach, tucked between a cypress creek and a row of sea oats the color of old brass. 180 houses, gated, pavilion in the middle, magnolias lining every street. The community was built in 2002 on land the developer bought from several old Panhandle families. One of those families was mine. That detail gets buried later. For now, just remember it. 2 days after I moved in, Darlene Voss pulled into my driveway in a pearl white Lexus GX. She parked it diagonally across the gravel like she owned the road. Mid-40s, bleached blonde, linen blazer over yoga pants, a black clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She rang the doorbell 3 times before I could finish wiping paint thinner off my hands. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, already walking in. "I'm the president of this community, 9 years running. I brought your welcome packet." The welcome packet was a bill, $2,400 in fines. The charges? A roof repair I'd made without architectural committee approval, scaffolding that had been up for exactly 1 afternoon, and what she called an overall condition unbecoming of the community's standard. The cottage was freshly painted, the grass was cut, and my grandfather had built the place in 1953 with cedar milled from his own land. I read the letter twice, then looked up. "Ma'am," I said, "this house was standing before this neighborhood existed." She smiled the way women like her smile when they think they've already won. "Well, now it's standing inside my neighborhood." That night, at 2 in the morning, I was pulled out of sleep by music. Reggaeton, loud enough to shake the window screens. I walked onto the porch and saw 6 strangers in the pool just off my grandmother's back fence. Empty beer bottles bobbing in the filter skimmer. Someone urinating on my mother's gardenia bushes. A Bluetooth speaker the size of a toolbox propped on the pool gate. I found Darlene the next morning, drinking cold brew at the pavilion. I asked her, calmly, what she planned to do about vacationers using the pool at 2 a.m. She laughed the way you laugh at a child who's asked a foolish question. "Caleb," she said, like we were old friends, "the pool is community property. I manage community policy. You're new here. Learn the rules of the game before you start playing." I closed my eyes for one full breath. I thought about Hannah. I thought about the night she held my hand in the hospital. She said very quietly, "Don't ever fight out of anger, Caleb. Fight because it's right." I nodded once. I walked away. Darlene watched me go, sipping her cold brew, completely certain she had already handled the problem. She had not handled anything. She had just started a chess clock. And somewhere upstairs in my mother's attic, inside a Winchester gun safe my grandfather bought in 1962, sat a piece of paper. That paper was going to end Darlene Voss's 9-year reign. faster than she could possibly understand. Darlene's first countermove came the next afternoon on Facebook. She posted a 6-paragraph essay to the private Ashford Bluff community group. No names, but everyone knew. She wrote about a new resident who had aggressively confronted paying vacationers and spoken in threatening tones to board members trying to preserve neighborhood harmony. She asked her followers to stand with her and not tolerate this pattern of hostility. 48 neighbors unfriended me overnight. 2 stopped returning my wave at the mailbox. The couple across the street suddenly found their driveway very interesting every time I walked by. I've been called worse by better. The Coast Guard teaches you not to react when you're being framed. You wait, you document, and you let the evidence build itself. So I sat on my mother's porch that evening, watching the sun burn red across the bay. The ceiling fan rattled above me like it was loose at the bolt. Ruth poured iced tea into a mason jar, a wedge of fresh lemon floating on top. She sat down next to me. You remember what your grandfather used to call them? No, Mama. Hollow people wearing paper crowns. She took a long sip. He said they're dangerous because they actually believe the crown is real. My grandfather Abner Whitaker died in 1998. I was 32. He had been a commercial shrimper, then a Walton County surveyor for 20 years after his back gave out. He left my mother this land. Specifically, this land. That fact would matter very soon. I just didn't know it yet. A truck rumbled to a stop at the curb. Hank Brinkley, 67, retired plumber, lived 3 doors down, always had a baseball cap pulled low and a dip in his lower lip. He walked up the porch steps, nodded at my mother, and set a 6-pack of cream soda on the railing. Caleb, he said. I read her Facebook post. Sounds about right. She did this to the Pembertons in 2019, the Garretts in 2020, the Hollis family in 2022, and that young couple on Willow Bend last summer, the Thorntons. They all left. She runs people out. It's what she does. I looked at him. How many meetings did they lose before they gave up? 3, sometimes 4. She gets loud. She gets crowds. She gets the board to stack the vote. He shook his head. Don't be number 5, son. He clinked a cream soda into my hand and walked back down the steps. The smell of citronella drifted off the porch rail. Cicadas in the pine trees. Somewhere on the next block a kid was practicing trumpet. Same 3 notes over and over. That night at 10:45, the pool noise started again. Louder this time. 9 of them. A girl screaming for her drink to be refilled. Someone diving off the top of the pavilion roof and splashing into the shallow end. I stepped into my workshop in the side garage, the one I'd set up when I first moved in. Pulled a sealed box off the bottom shelf. Inside were 3 4K outdoor trail cameras with cellular backhaul, the kind wildlife researchers use. No Wi-Fi, no hack risk. Each one would upload to my private cloud every 15 minutes. I took a headlamp and a ladder and climbed the tall loblolly pine at the back fence line. The bark was sticky with resin in the humidity. Mosquitoes found my neck within 30 seconds. I lashed the first camera to a branch 20 feet up. I angled it on the pool gate and the keypad. Then I wrapped the housing in camo so it looked like a bird feeder. The second camera went on a magnolia closer to the pavilion. The third I kept for later. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened the footage on my laptop. There she was at 9:15 the night before. Darlene Voss, in a silk robe, walking up to the pool gate with a key fob I had never authorized. She let 9 people in. Then she accepted a cream-colored envelope from a tall man in board shorts. He kissed her cheek and said, clear as a bell on the audio track. Cash, just like you asked, Miss D. I did not yell. I did not call her. I did not call anyone. I just saved the clip to 3 locations, labeled it with the date, and started a spreadsheet. Column 1, date and time. Column 2, number of guests. Column 3, license plate. Column 4, envelope confirmed, yes or no. By sunrise on day 3 in Ashford Bluff, I had begun the paper trail that was going to bury her. 4 days later, the certified mail arrived. USPS green card, signature required, return receipt requested. I signed for the envelope at the mailbox and opened it right there on the gravel driveway. Inside was a formal notice of violation from the Ashford Bluff Homeowners Association. $2,400, due within 30 days. The listed reason was Unauthorized structural modification of a residential exterior without board architectural approval. The unauthorized structural modification was simple. I had replaced 19 asphalt shingles on a corner of the cottage roof. A tropical storm had peeled them up the week before I arrived. I filed the correct written appeal that same afternoon. I delivered it to Darlene's mailbox personally, in a sealed manila folder, with a dated cover letter and photographs of the storm damage. 48 hours later, I received her response in the same mailbox. One sheet of paper, one sentence. Appeal denied. No further correspondence will be entertained. That was Friday. On Monday morning, the Waste Pro truck rolled past my curb without stopping. I watched it from the porch with my second cup of coffee and a piece of toast. I walked inside, looked up the Waste Pro service number, and called. "Yes, sir, I see the address," the dispatcher said. She had a tired, patient voice. "The HOA has requested a temporary suspension of service for your unit due to a violation on file." The HOA can do that? The HOA pays the master contract. They can request suspensions on any individual unit. "I'm sorry, sir. You'll need to work it out with them." I thanked her and hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a while, hands flat on the counter, looking at the ceiling. The smell of dead blue crabs from the bottom of the trash bin was already starting to work its way through the plastic lid. Florida summer does not forgive you. 92 degrees by 10 in the morning. By Wednesday, the trash was going to rot the whole side yard. I loaded the bags into the bed of my truck and drove them to the county transfer station. $11 cash. I kept the receipt. That afternoon, I heard a knock at the sliding glass door. Dean Armstrong, 60 years old, tall, white beard trimmed close, a retired aerospace engineer who had moved to the coast in 2015. He was the vice president of the HOA board. He and Darlene had been locking horns quietly for 2 years. He stepped inside and sat at my kitchen table without being asked. Something men his age do when something needs to be said. "I can't stand her anymore, Caleb. I got that impression. I don't have the votes to remove her. Lyle Pettit is in her pocket. 3 others are afraid of her. That leaves me, 2 maybes, and a lot of quiet people who watch." He laced his fingers together. "But if you have something, anything, I'm on your side. I'll swing the room if I can." I nodded slowly. "I may have something, soon." He looked relieved, which is a look men do not wear often. On his way out, he paused at the door and turned. "She fined Hank Brinkley $600 last spring. Fence too tall," she said. "That fence has been there since 1989. It's in the original plat map. He paid it anyway because he's 67 and tired. That's how she wins, Caleb. She wins by making good men tired." After he left, I drove to Hank's house and sat on his porch for an hour, listening to him tell stories about the old panhandle. The way it was before the developers came. The way my grandfather, Abner, had known every inch of this coast, from the Apalachicola River down to Pensacola Bay. That night was the worst pool party yet. 12 vacationers, a bachelorette group, judging by the sashes. Someone climbed to the pool pavilion's metal roof and leapt off. He cracked one of my grandmother's slate patio tiles on the way down. 2 of my cameras caught every second of it in ultra-high definition. After the noise died out around 3 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a photograph Hannah had taken of me 10 years ago, on a fishing trip in Biloxi. I was laughing. I was 39 and had no idea what was coming. I whispered to the picture, the way men whisper to their dead, when no one is listening. "I'm tired of being tired, sweetheart." And in my head, clear as an AM radio in the dead of night, I heard her answer. "I never wanted you to live like a tired man, Caleb. I wanted you to live like yourself." The next morning, for the first time in 3 years, I did. The next Saturday, I drove 2 hours east to Panama City to bury Earl Hanratty. Earl had been my petty officer on the cutter Decisive for 7 years. Lung cancer, 64, 3 daughters. A Coast Guard funeral is a long thing. Folded flag, 3 rifle volleys, taps on a bugle that cuts right through the collar of your dress uniform. I was gone from sunup to sunset. When I pulled back into Magnolia Lane at 8:45 that evening, the headlights swept across my mother's yard. Something wasn't right. Then I saw them. 3 palm trees, 47 years old, planted by my grandmother Dottie in 1978, after my grandfather brought her the saplings from a trip to the Keys. Drooping, yellowing, leaves crackling like dry paper in the evening wind. I stopped the truck in the middle of the driveway and got out slowly. I touched one palm frond with my fingertips. It snapped off in my hand. Hank came hustling across the street in house slippers, flip-flopping on the hot asphalt. His face was red. His voice was shaking. Caleb, son, I got it on video. I filmed the whole damn thing. I was on my porch with my binoculars when they came over the fence. Who came over the fence? 4 men, a landscaping crew in white trucks. No lettering, no company logo. Darlene was standing right there on your side, pointing at the palms. She had a jug of Roundup, industrial strength, the blue label. I know the brand. I used to spray it on kudzu. He held his phone up. I'm sending it to you right now. I watched the video on my mother's kitchen table. 14 minutes, shot from across the street with a steady hand. Darlene in her white linen blazer, pointing and barking. Her voice came through the audio, clear enough to hear the individual words even with Hank's porch fan spinning in the background. Tear those dead things out before the guests complain. The trees were not dead. The trees were fine before the crew arrived. You could see the green at the base of each trunk in the opening frames. Then the spray. Then the yellowing starting within the hour. By the time the footage ended, the palms looked like burnt straw. Ruth came into the kitchen behind me, quiet as a shadow. She had not cried during Earl's funeral. She did not cry now. She stood next to me with one hand resting on my shoulder. She looked at the screen for a long time. Your grandmother watered those with a tin bucket every morning, the first 4 summers. I carried the water myself when my arms were young enough. I know, Mama. Go up to the attic, Caleb. Your father's Winchester safe. The combination is the day we got married, 1970, 4/18. What's in it? Something your grandfather hid. Something he told me never to use unless those people up at the pool ever stepped over the line. They stepped over it today. I climbed the pull-down ladder. The attic was blast furnace hot. Cedar beams, dust motes hanging in the slant of the single bulb. I wiped sweat out of my eyes and found the safe in the back corner, behind a box of my grandfather's fishing tackle. Green Winchester steel, the word safe embossed across the top. Probably bought at Sears in 1962. 4/18/7/0. The door groaned open on old hinges. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, sat 3 items. A black and white photograph of my grandfather standing next to the developer of Ashford Bluff in 1978. Both of them smiling, shaking hands, a surveyor's pole stuck in the sand between them. A stack of property tax receipts running from 1979 to 2025 in my grandmother's handwriting, then my mother's. And underneath those, protected by a rigid cardboard backing, a deed. The deed was stamped and recorded with the Walton County Clerk on October 14, 1978. The legal description named a 2.4-acre parcel along the Gulf side of what would eventually become Ashford Bluff. The grantor was the original coastal developer. The grantee was Abner Whitaker. And at the bottom, paper clipped to the back, was a handwritten note to my mother, dated April 3, 1995. 7 words. My grandfather's firm, slow cursive. Never let them take this from you. Never let them take it from Caleb. I sat down in the heat of that attic and did not move for a long time. The bulb buzzed overhead. The wind from the Gulf pushed against the rafters outside. I pictured Darlene's face that morning, smirking, convinced she ruled this neighborhood. I picked up my phone and called Maggie Ellison. Voicemail. I left one sentence. Maggie, it's Caleb. I need to see you tomorrow morning. I think my grandfather left me the pool. Maggie Ellison's law office sat above a shuttered Pier 1 in Defuniak Springs, up on the 2nd floor of a brick building from 1914. Wooden stairs, scuffed and creaking. The hallway smelled like brewed coffee and old paper. Maggie opened the door herself before I could knock. 51 years old. Same short red hair since middle school. Gold wire-rimmed glasses pushed up on her forehead. Her husband Ben died of a heart attack in 2019, playing tennis. She had been at Hannah's funeral. She had cried more than I did that day. Let me see it, she said, before I'd even shut the door. I laid the oilcloth bundle on her desk. She put her glasses on. For 4 minutes, she said nothing. She read the deed once. She read it again. She pulled a large magnifier from a drawer and studied the clerk's stamp. Then she looked up. Caleb, this was never rescinded. This was never conveyed. Do you understand? Tell me in plain English, Mags. She turned her monitor. She was already logged into the Walton County Property Appraisers database. She typed in the parcel ID. The result loaded. Parcel 07S-19W-14-006-00-0004. Gulf adjacent. 2.4 acres. Current owner of record, Abner Whitaker Revocable Trust. Status, active. Property taxes, paid annually. Last payment received, January 15th, 2026. Payer, Ruth E. Whitaker, trustee. Your grandfather set up the trust in 1994, Maggie said. Your mother has paid property tax on this parcel every year since he died. Quietly. The bill was small. She never mentioned it because she didn't understand what she was holding. But the county knows. I stared. So the pool, the pool deck, the pavilion, the cabanas, the mechanical room. All of it sits on land your family owns, has owned, continuously, since October of 1978. She leaned back. This should have been conveyed to the HOA when Ashford Bluff was incorporated in 2002. The developer's plat map shaded the parcel as a common amenity, but no deed of conveyance was ever executed. It's a 24-year paperwork error, which means the HOA has been using, maintaining, and now monetizing private real estate belonging to your family, without authorization, without compensation, without even knowing it. I sat down slowly. Maggie pulled out a yellow legal pad. This isn't just trespass, Caleb. This is unjust enrichment. 23 years of HOA dues collected for upkeep on your land. Every vacation rental fee Darlene has pocketed. You are looking at a six-figure settlement, probably north of $180,000 in historical maintenance alone. Maggie, I'm not done. Darlene's been running an unregistered short-term rental operation on the amenity. Florida Statute 509.013 requires any public lodging establishment to register with DBPR and collect lodging tax. She has not done either. That's a criminal matter. I thought about the cream-colored envelope on my camera footage. One more thing, I said. Whitaker Systems installed the entire gate and access control network for Ashford Bluff in 2015. Keypads, master controller, audit logs. I am still the registered super administrator. Nobody revoked my credentials because nobody knew too. Maggie took her glasses off. She set them on the desk. She looked at me a long time. Caleb, we file the quiet title. We report the tax violation. We preserve the evidence. But we keep it absolutely silent until the moment of service. If Darlene finds out early, she'll run to her husband, and Trent Voss will start burning paperwork and yanking your permits. Understood. And when we do this, we do it in public, where she can't spin it, where everyone sees. I nodded. On the drive back to Seagrove, I pulled over at a gas station and opened the Whitaker Systems admin app on my phone. Ashford Bluff sat at the top of my client list. Every keypad, every gate, every code. A small green dot beside each one. Online, awaiting instruction. For the next 2 weeks, Maggie and I worked like we were running a wartime operation. No Facebook, no casual conversation, no chatter at the Publix deli counter. Everything moved through encrypted email or face-to-face, never once through the community. First, the deed. Maggie hired Ellis Crofton, a 73-year-old licensed surveyor out of Niceville who had worked on coastal parcels for 50 years. He drove down in a dusty Bronco, pulled out a brass theodolite my grandfather would have recognized, and walked the full boundary of the 2.4 acres. He flagged the corners with orange ribbon, photographed every pin, and certified that the parcel matched the 1978 legal description to the foot. Then he pulled a loose thread. The current pool pavilion's east wall sat 3 feet inside the parcel. That meant the HOA had built a permanent structure on my family's land without an easement. That's not just trespass, that's a structural encroachment, which, under Florida law, triggers removal or a negotiated easement purchase at market rate. Maggie smiled when Ellis delivered the report. She said, "That's leverage we didn't even need." Next, the damages. Maggie sat at her office computer for 3 long afternoons with HOA annual reports pulled from the Walton County Records Division. She tallied every dollar the HOA had spent on the pool since 2002, resurfacing in 2008, pump replacement in 2013, pavilion rebuild in 2018, tile work, chemicals, landscaping, lighting. 23 years of spending on a parcel the HOA did not own. Total, $186,420. Then she cross-referenced that with the HOA's annual dues receipts. Under Florida common law, a homeowner cannot pay dues intended to maintain another private owner's property. The entire pool-related portion of every homeowner's dues for 23 years was, in technical terms, collected without lawful basis. "Don't worry," Maggie told me. "We're not going after the homeowners. We're going after Darlene and the board in their capacity. But the threat of that liability is what keeps the rest of the neighbors on our side." Next, the STR tax violation. Maggie filed a written complaint with Florida DBPR. I filed a parallel anonymous tip with the IRS Criminal Investigation tip line. Not anonymous in the hiding sense. I signed my name. I just did it quietly and asked for a case number. Darlene's enhancement fund had taken in roughly $46,000 in unreported cash over 24 months. My cameras confirmed the pattern. Lyle's photocopied receipts confirmed the amount. That alone was enough for a state-level prosecution. Next, the cameras. I climbed the loblolly again and added 2 more units. One angled on the pool keypad from the north. One disguised as a bluebird nest box on a magnolia branch facing the pavilion parking lot. Every handoff, every envelope, every vacation renter receiving a 6-digit code whispered in Darlene's signature cadence. All of it in 4K with audio, uploaded every 15 minutes to 3 separate cloud backups. Now, the technology. I sat at my kitchen table one night with a single board computer, a terminal window, and a cup of coffee gone cold. I wrote a small script, 52 lines of code. When triggered from my phone, it would push an admin override command to every keypad in the Ashford Bluff network. Every current code would be revoked in less than 1 second. Only my credentials would work. I tested it on my own cottage gate twice. Both times it worked exactly as designed. Hank and June Cartwright joined the effort. Hank flew a DJI drone up the coast at golden hour and got clean aerial shots of the parcel boundary. June, who taught 4th grade in Santa Rosa Beach, sat with each of the 4 families Darlene had pushed out over the years. She collected 6 notarized statements: the Pembertons, the Garretts, the Hollis family, the Thorntons, all of them broken down in plain language. The final planning meeting happened at Maggie's office on a Tuesday evening. Me, Maggie, and Dean Armstrong. Whiteboard, 3 coffees. 4th of July, Maggie said. Annual HOA meeting. Pool pavilion, 10 a.m. Darlene has invited WMBB News 13 for a morning segment. Process server delivers at 10:10. I present at 10:15. Caleb, you trigger the lockout when she moves to the gate. Sheriff Holloway arrives at 11:15. Dean rubbed his beard. She's going to lose her mind. That's the point, Maggie said. Let the whole neighborhood watch. The night before, I stood on the porch and watched distant fireworks over Destin, across the bay. Faint bursts of red and gold, the sound arriving seconds late. I raised a whiskey glass. "Hannah," I said to the salt air, "we're doing it right, sweetheart." 3 days before the 4th of July, Lyle Pettit slipped on his own office chair and told Darlene something she never should have heard. Lyle was the HOA treasurer. 55, soft-bodied, cheap polo shirts, always anxious to please. He had overheard Darlene's assistant mention that some lawyer from Defuniak Springs had pulled 20 years of parcel records at the Walton County Courthouse earlier that week. Darlene's eyes had gone narrow, then flat. By that same evening, she had called an emergency community meeting. Subject line of the email blast: urgent, community integrity action, mandatory attendance. The meeting was set for the following night at the Ashford Bluff Clubhouse. Not the pavilion, the clubhouse. An indoor room with fluorescent lights, stale recirculated air, and folding chairs that creaked every time anyone shifted weight. She wanted a closed box. She wanted a vote in front of cameras she controlled. 73 homeowners showed up. I counted them as I walked in, 5 minutes before start time. I sat in the 3rd row on the aisle. Hank sat beside me. June sat 2 rows behind. Dean Armstrong sat at the board table up front, arms folded, not smiling. Maggie had told me the night before to wear khakis and a plain button-down, and to say absolutely nothing unless directly asked under oath. Darlene stood at the podium in a navy blazer and pearls. She slid her reading glasses down her nose. She began with her familiar cadence. "Friends, neighbors, we are gathered here tonight because one resident's behavior has risen to the level of a community emergency. No name yet, not legally required until a formal motion. She knew the rules better than most lawyers. I never posted a thing, but I did not correct her. I just watched. I am therefore introducing a motion to levy an $18,000 community disruption fine, effective immediately, I am also introducing a companion motion to bar this resident from all community amenities for 12 months, including the pavilion, pool, tennis courts, and fitness center. Dean. Yes, Dean. I have a question before we vote. Does the HOA hold the deed to the pool parcel? The room went still. The compressor on the AC unit outside clicked on with a small shudder. Darlene's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. She recovered in half a second. The pool. Then it should be easy to produce the deed. I've been on this board for 6 years, Darlene. I've never seen a deed for the pool. I'd like one produced. Murmurs. Quiet ones, but spreading like heat across the back rows. Lyle Pettit looked at his shoes. Another board member, a retired accountant named Glenn Vickers, cleared his throat twice and did not speak. Darlene went on like nothing had happened. The motion to levy is now open for discussion. Discussion was one-sided. 4 people spoke in favor. Then Hank stood up. I'd like to note for the record that I was fined $600 last year for a offense that predates this community by 13 years. I'd also like to note that the 4 families who left Ashford Bluff before me all received similar escalating fines. I've said my piece. He sat down. June stood up. She read a quiet, prepared statement naming the Pembertons, the Garretts, the Hollis family, and the Thorntons, 2 dates each, pattern clear. Darlene cut off further discussion. The motion is called to a vote. All in favor? 44 hands. All opposed? 23 hands. Abstain? 3 hands. She had won, but she had not crushed me. The 23 was the largest opposition vote she had seen in 9 years as president. I watched her face and saw something new flicker across it. Not rage, not pride. Something smaller and colder. Fear. After the meeting, I walked to my truck alone. The parking lot was half dark, sodium vapor lights humming. Trent Voss was leaning against Darlene's Lexus, arms crossed, a pistol tucked in a concealed carry holster, visible under his half-zipped windbreaker. Darlene's phone rang inside my pocket. She was calling my cell. She had put Trent on speaker, her voice sharp as a kitchen knife. You think you're clever, Caleb. You don't know who you're dealing with. Trent, behind her. Tell him, after the 4th, I am making his life in this county very hard. Zoning, permits, everything. I did not answer. I let the recording run. 3 minutes and 11 seconds of usable material. Florida is a single-party consent state. Every word was admissible. I saved the file to Maggie's encrypted drop folder before I pulled out of the lot. The next morning, Darlene doubled down instead of retreating. That was her nature. She could not process a vote that wasn't unanimous. She could not see a crack in her control without pouring more concrete over it. She sent out an email blast at 6 a.m. Subject: Holiday Weekend Pool Preview, Premium Access. The body invited the current roster of Airbnb guests to a private early access tour of the pool on July 3rd, at $75 per head. She CC'd the 3 local vacation rental managers who funneled guests through her. It was a public admission of everything she had been hiding. She did not realize it was evidence. She thought it was advertising. My cameras caught 22 guests at the gate that afternoon, 22 cash transactions, 22 envelopes. One of the managers wore a pink polo with his company logo stitched across the chest. The footage was cleaner than cable news. That same afternoon, Maggie got a phone call from the Walton County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Wade Holloway himself. 61 years old, built like a barrel, career of 28 years in the county. His investigator had cross-referenced our DBPR complaint with 3 unrelated anonymous tips from other Ashford Bluff homeowners over the past year. Holloway told Maggie on a recorded call that he would personally be present at the July 4th meeting. He would arrive at 11:15 a.m. with 2 deputies and a written warrant for Darlene's arrest on charges of tax evasion and operating an unlicensed lodging establishment. That evening, I drove out to Seagrove Cemetery. It was a small coastal plot, maybe 80 stones, surrounded by a low iron fence and a stand of loblolly pines. Hannah was buried in the northeast corner, under a live oak older than both of us combined. I brought a bundle of white carnations, which were her favorite. I set them against the headstone and sat in the grass with my back to the oak. Tomorrow is the day, sweetheart, I said. Everything we planned, everything Maggie drew up. Mama's ready, Hank's ready, Dean's ready. A mockingbird started up somewhere in the pines, working its way through 3 songs at once. The grass smelled warm and sweet. A yellow pickup rolled slowly past on the coast road, its radio playing a country station, the volume low. I want you to know one thing, Hannah. This isn't about revenge, not the way people will think. What that woman did, she would have done to the next family who moved here. She did it to 4 families before me. She was going to do it forever, so I'm going to make sure she doesn't. I sat there for another hour before I drove home. Back at the cottage, a surprise was waiting on my porch. Lyle Pettit, the HOA treasurer. He was perched on the railing with a manila folder clutched against his thigh, sweat on his upper lip, eyes darting to every shadow. "Caleb, I need to talk to you." "Come inside, Lyle." He followed me into the kitchen. He sat at my table. He did not touch the glass of water I set in front of him. He opened the folder and slid it across the wood. Photocopies, 3 years' worth. Weekly cash deposit slips from Darlene's enhancement fund that she had pressured him to sign as treasurer. Handwritten tallies of guest fees. Email exchanges between Darlene and the 3 vacation rental managers. A note in her handwriting that read, "Lyle, deposit this as a dues prepayment under Unit 0427. Same as last time, don't file with the state." "She's been coercing me for 2 years, Lyle said. His voice cracked once. "My wife has MS. Our insurance goes through the HOA's group plan. She threatened to yank me off the plan if I talked. I'm sorry, Caleb. I should have spoken up years ago." "You're speaking up now, Lyle. That's what matters. Will you say this to the sheriff?" I already called his office this morning. I left a full statement. I put my hand on his shoulder for a moment. I walked him to the door. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and called Maggie. It was almost 11 at night. She answered on the second ring. "We have a witness," I said. "Treasurer, with paperwork, and he's already gone to Holloway." Maggie was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Caleb, tomorrow isn't a confrontation anymore. Tomorrow is a trial." I slept 4 hours. I got up at 5. I ran barefoot on the beach while the sun came up over the water, pink and gold and silver, the way it only does on summer mornings on the Gulf. I ate scrambled eggs and bacon at my mother's kitchen table. Ruth looked across her coffee cup at me. "Your father would be proud of you today, Caleb." I kissed the top of her head, pulled on a plain blue button-down, walked out the door. 9 a.m. on the 4th of July. The pool pavilion was dressed for the 4th of July the way Darlene dressed everything. Red, white, and blue bunting on every rail. An American flag the size of a bedsheet draped across the back. A podium with a gooseneck microphone and a sweating pitcher of ice water. A catering table with deviled eggs and small flags stabbed into a cheese wheel. 200 residents showed up, boat shoes and tennis whites. 3 vacation renters in swimsuits were already in the shallow end, mimosas balanced on the pool lip. The WMBB News 13 van was parked along the curb. Samantha Greer was checking her microphone while her camera operator adjusted a white balance card. I walked in at 9:58. 6th row on the aisle. Plain blue button-down, khakis, phone in my right hand. Maggie sat 2 rows behind me in a navy suit. Dean sat up front at the board table. Hank and June sat on the left. My mother Ruth stood under a magnolia at the edge of the deck, hands folded, watching. At 10 o'clock, Darlene stepped to the podium in a white linen dress, hair done, lipstick reapplied. "Neighbors, friends, esteemed members of our community press. Welcome to our 9th annual 4th of July celebration. Today we honor the country we love and the community we have built together over 9 years of disciplined leadership." She swept her arm across the pool. "This amenity behind me represents everything we stand for. Cleanliness, order, excellence. A place where neighbors gather and where our valued visitors can experience the pride of Ashford Bluff." Samantha's camera panned the pool on cue. At 10:10, a side gate clicked open. A man in a charcoal polo walked across the deck with a manila envelope. 20 years of serving legal papers for a living. He walked straight to Darlene at the podium. "Ma'am, Darlene Voss, you've been served. Quiet title action. Case number 2026-CA-0711, Walton County Circuit Court. Please sign." She signed without thinking. He handed her the envelope, turned, and walked out. The crowd went completely silent. Samantha's camera swung from the pool to Darlene's face. The color drained out of it in real time. Her mouth opened and closed once, like a fish gasping above water. From the 6th row, Maggie stood up. "Good morning. My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm an attorney. I represent the Whitaker family. I have a brief presentation." A retractable projection screen lowered behind the podium. Dean had rigged it the night before. The 1978 deed filled the screen. county clerk stamp visible in the corner. The land you are sitting on, Maggie said, her voice calm, has been continuously owned by the Whitaker family since October 14, 1978. It was never legally conveyed to the Ashford Bluff Homeowners Association. Here are 47 years of property tax receipts. Next slide. Here is a surveyor's report from Ellis Crofton, confirming the parcel boundary and the pavilion's encroachment. Next slide. And here, the next slide was a video. Darlene at the keypad. Darlene accepting a white envelope from a man in board shorts. Darlene counting bills in her palm. Audio loud and clean. Cash, just like you asked, Miss D, is one of 14 documented handoffs between Mrs. Voss and short-term rental guests, paying unreported cash fees to use the Whitaker family pool. My office has filed complaints with Florida DBPR and with the IRS. Darlene snapped out of her paralysis. This is a fabricated hit piece. Those videos are doctored. Samantha, get your camera on the pool. Let me show you our community amenity right now. She strode toward the pool gate. She punched her code into the keypad. The red LED blinked twice. She frowned, punched again. Red. She tried her admin override. Red. I tapped my phone once. The script executed in 0.8 seconds. Every gate in Ashford Bluff locked out to super admin only. Every keypad on the deck flashed red at the same time. The 3 vacation renters in the pool climbed out and tried the exit gate. Red. I stood up from my chair. I walked to the center of the deck. 200 heads turned. The access control network here was installed by my company, Whitaker Systems, in 2015. I'm the registered super administrator. When pending litigation is active on a contested amenity, standard protocol is admin override. The gates will open when the court clears them, not before. Darlene stared at me. The pearl on her ear caught the morning sun. At 11:15, 3 Walton County Sheriff's Office vehicles pulled into the lot. Sheriff Wade Holloway walked across the deck with 2 deputies behind him. He stopped in front of Darlene Voss. Mrs. Voss, I need to ask you a few questions about some cash deposits. One of the vacationers still dripping beside the pool said, slowly, Wait, we only paid $75. Samantha Greer's camera stayed rolling the entire time. I walked over to the Magnolia and stood next to my mother. She slipped her hand into mine. Neither of us smiled. We just stood there in the shade and let the morning finish its work. 6 weeks later, Judge Eileen Horowitz of the Walton County Circuit Court issued a ruling on the Whitaker quiet title action. The parcel belonged to the Whitaker family. Full stop. The HOA was ordered to pay $186,420 in historical maintenance restitution, another $42,000 in attorney's fees, and to execute, at its own expense, a formal survey re-establishing the encroachment boundary. Darlene Voss was indicted by a grand jury in August. 2 felony counts of operating an unlicensed public lodging establishment. 1 misdemeanor count of unreported commercial income. A federal IRS investigation followed. She pled out the state charges in October. 18 months supervised probation, full restitution, a lifetime ban from any HOA position in Florida. She lost her house 3 weeks later. The settlement ate through her savings. The Lexus GX was repossessed from the Publix parking lot in front of a dozen witnesses. Trent Voss was suspended from the zoning board the afternoon of July 4th. A September ethics review made it permanent. He moved to a rental in Freeport and took a job driving for a cement supplier. Ashford Bluff held a recall meeting on July 28th. The vote to remove Darlene passed 89-4. Dean Armstrong was elected interim president by acclamation. His first motion rewrote the governing documents. Every HOA amenity now had to have a deed on file, publicly accessible. Updated annually, the motion passed unanimously. 48 people who had unfriended me on Facebook sent apologies over the following months. Most were 1 line long. Sorry, Caleb, I should have known better. I accepted every one. Hannah would have wanted me to. In September, Maggie and I sat on my mother's porch with iced mint tea. The Gulf breeze smelled like salt and coming rain. So what are you doing with the parcel, Caleb? It's not mine to keep. Granddad didn't save it so I could charge admission. What then? Give it away. The right way. That's what I did. I placed the 2.4 acres under a conservation easement with Walton County. The easement guaranteed public access to the pool in perpetuity, free for every child in the local zip code. A formal partnership with the County Parks and Recreation Department would manage it. No HOA, no gate code, No fine print. Just a pool that belonged to the community, in the truest legal sense of the word. Then we opened the foundation. Hannah Whitaker Community Pool Foundation. Free swim lessons for every child who wanted them. A summer day camp for kids who couldn't afford the coast. A Hannah Scholarship for college students in public health or oncology nursing. $5,000 a year, 3 awards, in perpetuity. On Labor Day morning, we held the ribbon cutting. The county commissioner was there. Samantha Greer was there with her camera. 300 people showed up. My mother Ruth cut the yellow ribbon with a pair of big scissors, while a 4th grader from June's class held the other end. Behind the pool, 3 new palm trees had been planted that summer. I'd driven to the same Keys nursery my grandfather had used in 1978. I'd brought them home in the bed of my truck myself. They were tall and green, and already starting to settle into the panhandle wind. After the ribbon fell, the first group of kids flooded the pool deck. Towels slung over shoulders, goggles pushed up on foreheads, inner tubes under arms. Maggie stood next to me with her hand on my elbow. A little girl in a purple swimsuit, maybe 7 years old, stopped in front of a small bronze plaque at the gate. She read aloud, carefully, "In memory of Hannah Whitaker, who believed every child should know how to swim." She turned to her mother. "Mom, who was Hannah?" Her mother smiled. She was a woman who loved this town, baby. I felt the first real smile break across my face in 3 years. Salt air on my teeth, sun on my shoulders, my mother's small hand tightening in mine. If you've watched this far, I want to hear it. Drop me a comment below and tell me about your own HOA nightmare. I read every one. And if you think what Darlene Voss did to our community was crazy, stick around. Next week, I'm telling you about a property manager in Montana. She thought she could erase a disabled veteran's easement by forging a county seal. That one ends with handcuffs on a courthouse lawn. Subscribe so you don't miss it.
Friends, thank you for staying with me all the way to Caleb's story. What Darlene Voss did to her neighbors for 9 years is the exact pattern we see again and again in these HOA cases. Petty authority, selective enforcement, a board stacked with enablers, and a community too tired to fight back. Caleb won for one reason. He didn't fight back out of anger. He fought with patience, paperwork, and preparation. He kept his records. He knew his deed. He understood his own technology better than the woman trying to use it against him. And when the moment came, he didn't shout. He just pressed one button. That's the real lesson here. If you live in an HOA, pull your deeds, read your governing documents, audit your board's financials. Florida gives you that right under Statute 720-303, and most states have an equivalent. If something feels wrong, document everything from the very first day, because the Darlene Vosses of the world count on you being too tired to check. Drop your own HOA story in the comments. I read every single one, and the best ones become future videos. If you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the Montana case coming next week. Stay patient, stay documented, and I'll see you soon.